In this video, I'm going to share my updated thoughts on maintaining. For a while, there has been this big divide in the fitness industry between the more traditional bulk and the cut approach versus the more contemporary maintaining approach. But despite this big divide, I would argue that it is much more appropriate to think these two approaches as complementary strategies, or more specifically, like roads and bridges. Feeling a bit confused of what I just said? Great. Allow me to do the explanation here. So for those who are still not familiar with the term, maintaining, meaning maintaining plus gaining, is a fitness approach focused on building muscle while keeping your body fat stable by eating at or just slightly above your maintenance calories. This term was created by Greg Doucette and heavily promoted by him. Compared to the traditional bulking and cutting, the benefit of maintaining is that you get to stay lean all year round. Once you get in shape, you can stay in shape forever and just gradually build more muscle over time. And that is a very appealing selling point in an increasingly obesogenic but still very fat-phobic society. But like everything else in life, what comes along with a big benefit is also a big drawback. And the drawback is that if you only maintain, then the best that most people can achieve is only mediocre amount of muscle mass, usually somewhere very close to FF 21.5, enough to qualify you as a halfway intermediate, or what I prefer to call intermediate, but very far away from being advanced. And if you try to get bigger beyond this point but still only maintaining, usually you will fail very miserably. Now, I don't want to sound arrogant because FF 21.5 can still be very impressive to many people, especially when you're very lean. But in the grand scheme of what you can achieve as a natural lifter, this is decent only and definitely not considered as mind-blowing physiques. That's why maintaining has been heavily criticized by many smaller niche channels like Alex Leonidas, GVS, and me as well. Because we all at some point realized that our six-pack abs are the biggest roadblock to the growth of every other muscle group of our body. And we all decided that bulking is the only way to go if we want to get substantially bigger. That's why I say bulking and cutting is like main roads. If you want to travel as far as you can, most of the time you will be driving on main roads. Translate that into fitness language. If you want to get as big as you possibly can, most of the time you will be bulking and cutting. However, just like there will always be some bridges between the main roads, I do think maintaining is a necessary bridging strategy between bulking and cutting. And in reality, it is very rare for somebody to finish a long bulking phase and directly jump into a long cutting phase, or vice versa, finish a long cutting phase and straight away launch a long bulking phase. There will almost always be a transition period where you keep your calories steady for a while to let your body just settle down. And during this transition period, what you're doing is essentially maintaining. That's why I'm willing to bet that all of us who have undergone rounds of bulking and cutting have all subconsciously quote-unquote maintained to bridge between our cutting and the bulking phases, despite we have all heavily criticized maintaining. And as a bridging strategy, maintaining can be very effective because after an extended cutting phase, what you have successfully done is that you have sensitized all your muscle cells to the nutrient input, as the body has been deprived of energy and the nutrients for a long time. Now it will only take a little amount of extra calories and nutrients for the muscle cells to start growing again. And this is the situation where maintaining will make most sense, or this is the best textbook definition of maintaining. Eating just slightly above your previous calories and make efficient muscle growth. And to cite from my own experience from my recent 22-week fat loss phase, my weight was 74.8 kilos by the end of week 23, yet I was already 74.4 kilos by the end of week 17. During the 6 weeks, I have not substantially increased my calories, but I was still visibly leaner and heavier after 6 weeks. So technically, I could say that I've maintained for 6 weeks or 9 weeks or even 12 weeks because my body fat percentage was still somewhat decent until 25th of April in 2026. But remember, this kind of maintaining only happened towards the end of the grand scheme of 22-week long cutting phase. It will very unlikely happen just by itself. And on another note, this 6 weeks of so-called maintaining has also served as a potentiation for the next round of bulking, because once I decided to finish the transition period and deliberately increase my calories again, the progress of this current round of bulking, as you guys are seeing, is perhaps the best I've ever experienced. I will talk about the importance of bulking in the next video, but for now, maintaining for a short period of time after a long cut definitely makes a lot of sense to me. And on the other end of the spectrum, after you have just finished a long period of bulking, because the new contractile tissues, or so-called potential muscle growth you have accumulated during the bulk, need to stick around long enough for them to be permanent muscle growth. It is probably even more important to maintain for a short period of time, because if you go on a cut directly after the long bulk, many of the new contractile tissues will be lost in the cut, and you will lose a big chunk of your expected muscle gains. Now, some people may argue that this should not be called maintaining because you will be slashing quite some calories during the transition period after the bulk. But if you are bulking, your caloric consumption will already be substantially above your maintenance calories, and if you're only slashing some calories, you will still be slightly above your maintenance calories. So technically, that still falls under the definition of maintaining, I suppose. And once again, to quote from my personal experience, my heaviest weight, 92.5 kilos, was achieved on 17th of September 2025. Or in a broader sense, my weight has been over 91 kilos since the end of August 2025. For those of you who are not familiar with my bulk up to the max look, I would like to direct your attention to one of my most valuable videos from FMI 25 to FMI 26, 10 things I've learned. But back to the topic of this video, I was sort of maintaining for a month, trying to hold on to the new muscle mass I've accumulated during the bulk prior to starting the 22-week cutting on 4th of October 2025. So once again, maintaining for a short period of time after a long bulk makes a lot of sense to me. And to be honest, all these personal experiences I've just cited should feel like standard procedure for most people. Because like I said just 5 minutes ago, it is very rare for someone to directly jump from a long bulk to a long cut, or vice versa. There will almost always be a transition period where you keep your calories steady for a while and quote-unquote maintain during this transition period. And that's the point I want to drive home in this video. Maintaining is only a necessary bridging strategy between the main strategy of bulking and cutting. And just like bridges are only a necessary component of all the main roads, necessary, but in most instances, not the main component. And due to this bridging nature, if you're always maintaining, you're probably doing something wrong. But if you're never maintaining, you're probably also doing something wrong. It is just like, are some bridges longer than some roads? Certainly they are, but do you know for damn sure that even the longest bridges are still way shorter than most roads in the world? And can you drive only on roads without any bridges? I suppose you can in some situations, but if you want to travel the longest distance, you're bound to cross a few bridges on your trip. That's it guys, my updated thoughts on maintaining, a necessary bridging strategy only. Hope you have enjoyed this video, and if you do, please give it a like and consider subscribing to my channel. In the next video, I will share my updated thoughts on bulking, so please stay tuned. Thank you for your support, and I will see you all in the next video.